Welcome back to Democracy Docket's 2024 Candid Q&A series. My name is Crystal Hill, and today I'm joined by Michigan Supreme Court Justice Kyra Harris Bolden. Justice Bolden, thank you so much for joining me today for our Candid Q&A series. You were appointed to the court in 2022, started your term in 2023. So can you talk to voters about why you want to keep your seat on the court and what you're hoping to accomplish in another term?
So in this year and a half or a little bit over now that I've been on the court, I have been able to author 8 majority opinions, which I'm very proud of. A lot of people may not know that I'm also a liaison to our treatment courts, which is our alternative to incarceration. And so making sure that they have the resources necessary in order to function and be successful. And I also sit on the child welfare task force for the Michigan Supreme Court, and we try to make sure that we have our ear to the ground of what's happening with our children in our foster care system and making sure that they have adequate representation. And so a lot of things happen at the court, and I wish to continue to do the great work that I've been doing for the last year and a half and keep making great decisions for Michiganders. And it's been quite the wonderful experience. And I hope that Michiganders will see the hard work that I'm putting into this job and retain me for the seat.
And as a judge, it seems like you're really intentional about, talking to people, engaging with Michiganders about the court. And now, you're running a campaign to keep your seat. How are you talking about the race with voters? Do you find that they understand the judiciary, or is it kind of an educational process of helping them understand, what they're voting for and why?
100%. Along with name ID, I've had to run a voter education campaign on top of that, which I will admit that I didn't have a full understanding of that process. Because I was a state representative before, people pretty much know if they're going to vote, they know to vote for their partisan candidates. It's a little bit more difficult with the judiciary because, we don't have any issues that we really stand on. And so, most of us just say, we want justice and integrity in our courts, right? But that might be true or not true, or it might be different, depending upon who's running for a judicial seat. So I get a lot of questions about issues. I get that, and I respectfully let people know that that is not my job to make the law. I interpret the law, and I'm actually prohibited from talking about issues by our judicial canon. So that has been an educational opportunity. The other educational opportunity that we have really been pushing is, just voting down ballot. A lot of people here in Michigan, we have the opportunity to vote straight ticket. And so people will vote straight ticket, turn in their ballot, and they're done. And they miss the nonpartisan section of the ballot, which is where our judiciary happens to be. And so we've really been telling people, if you want to vote for me, if you want to vote for your judges, the third co-equal branch of government, you have to vote in the nonpartisan section of the ballot. Because I will say in 2022, there are so many people that thought I was captured by straight ticket voting. And so there are so many people that thought they were voting for me and they weren't. And so it's even more crushing, right? If people, just didn't want to vote for me, that's fine. But, it's a little bit gut wrenching when people thought they were voting for me and weren't. So we're really having to push that message of voting in the nonpartisan section of the ballot.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about. I've been talking to other judicial candidates about this very issue of, running as kind of a partisan on a partisan ticket, or sort of in Michigan. I know it's kind of weird because you start off, you're nominated by a political party and then you run in the general election. But with you having had a background as a legislator, was it sort of difficult to do, I guess, a different type of campaigning than maybe you were used to as a lawmaker, who can say, I'll do this and this when I get to legislature, but as a judge, you can't necessarily promise.
Yeah. I don't know if it was difficult for me rather than people to understand that I'm in a different position. So people have been used to me being a little bit more vocal maybe doing certain events or, promoting a business of the month or being at a ribbon cutting or things like that. And those are things that we cannot do as judges. And so I understand the confusion, particularly when it comes to me, because people have seen me in a very different role. And so it has been a little bit difficult for people to kind of make the switch in their mind from, well, you were just doing all these things and now you're not, or now you can't. So explaining that to people has been more difficult than me accepting that I can't do certain things.
Yeah, and I wanted to, you mentioned earlier about, the opinions that you've authored. I wanted to ask about a specific one that we covered at Democracy Docket surrounding Secretary Benson and her rules for partisan election challenges. I saw that you had authored that majority opinion, and not to sort of get into like the weeds of, of election law, but I'm curious, with that in mind, how would you, I guess, describe the role of the Michigan Supreme Court in ensuring that elections, are fair and secure? There's obviously a lot of anxiety around the 2024 election, around Michigan. And so I'm curious, what is the high court's role, moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of people think the Michigan Supreme Court may focus on criminal law or may focus on constitutional issues. And I tell people we don't focus on one thing. We hear everything, literally every single aspect of Michigan law that can be challenged in a state court, we can hear at the Michigan Supreme Court. Now, obviously, we're very selective in what cases we take up, but election cases in Michigan are going to be resolved by the Michigan Supreme Court ultimately, for the most part. And so we've had several cases that have come up. One is the one that you just referred to, and I authored the majority opinion on. But I think it's important that people understand that when it comes to election law, when it comes to interpreting constitutional amendments, who or what gets on the ballot sometimes is challenged at the Michigan Supreme Court level. Whether someone is entitled to a new trial, whether someone's children are taken away in a termination of parental rights case. That is all taken up at the Michigan Supreme Court, issues that I've seen. And while I may not have written the majority opinion, there are certainly things that I have made decisions on. And so, election law is a critical piece of that, but we really determine how Michiganders will live their lives today. And I say for generations to come, because our decisions today set a precedent for how people will live their lives. And that will affect not only the people now, but will affect, our children. It will affect my child that's 2 years old now, and probably her children, should she choose to have any.
And given that the court does decide so many critical cases that have these wide implications, as a judge who's seeking a seat on the court, not just you, but just anyone who, is wanting to, have that role, what do you think the qualifications, are for someone who wants to sit on the court? Should they have been a judge for some time? Should they have litigation experience? What do you think makes the person qualified for that job?
That's an interesting question. What's interesting about the Michigan Supreme Court is the majority of justices sitting were not judges prior to joining the Michigan Supreme Court. And we have a wide depth and breadth of knowledge. We do have those that were judges. We have those that were litigators, but maybe not appellate attorneys. We have some that are appellate attorneys. We have professors, right? We have people that focus in a one particular area of law. And so I think it's good to have a diversity of experiences on the Michigan Supreme Court, especially when we don't just rule on, obviously, the merits of cases, but we're in charge of court rules, right? So we are in charge of how attorneys handle an IOTA account. We're in charge of how judges conduct themselves in the courtroom. Like recently, we created a court rule to make sure that judges respected pronouns of the people that were before them. So it's not just practical experience, which I think is very, very important. And I've had the ability to not only be a law clerk myself, be a litigator, but I've actually been able to make laws. And so I've had a unique view that I bring to the table, which I think is critical. But I think some of the most important aspects are people that are open to information, people that are open to new information. I think people can get stuck in their own ways and think that they're correct all the time, but you have to be willing to accept new information. You have to be compassionate, and you have to be able to, share your unique perspective and your lived experiences and bring that to the table. So I think that character, I think integrity are at the top of the list when we're talking about and compassion when we're talking about what makes a good judge or justice.
And it seems like since Dobbs, especially the ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court, more eyes are turning to state Supreme Courts across the country to establish or enshrine or uphold, I should say, various individual rights, abortion rights, voting rights. I wonder, do you worry that, courts are kind of becoming increasingly political and are being seen as such, because of, like, last year, for example, in Wisconsin, that judicial race ended up being the most expensive in the nation's history because there was just so much at stake surrounding abortion rights. And so when we talk about, Michigan's court has a Democratic majority, I guess how should people be viewing the court in light of kind of these partisan conversations surrounding the court and Republicans controlling it or Democrats controlling it?
What I will say is the most important thing are lived experiences that you are bringing to the table. So I would garner to say that we all, follow the rule of law, but there is different interpretations based upon your lived experience that you bring to the table. That's why all decisions are not unanimous, but they're not meant to be. That's why there's 7 people on the court so that you can have a majority in certain cases. But I will say that there have been times where I have voted with the moderate or conservative justices. There have been times where I disagree with everyone and I've just written separately, right? And so I think that's the important part. I think it's that, are you open to new information? Are you willing to stand alone and to say what you have to say? What is your background and experience in things? And do you believe that the court should reflect the diversity of the lived experiences and perspective of Michiganders? I think that that's probably the most important difference. Not necessarily political views or affiliation, because that's not really a role that plays directly into our thought processes. But value wise, do you believe that diversity matters? Do you believe that lived experience matters? Do you believe in equal justice for everyone? Right? Those things are important.
And when you were appointed to the court, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up how special your appointment was, given that you were the first Black woman to sit on Michigan's High Court. And when I was looking at the release, it said, you had praised, people you admire, Judge Sheila Johnson, Judge Deborah Nance, and others who seem to inspire your journey. I just wanted to talk more about that. Why did these women inspire you so much? Are there others who you feel have sort of helped you in your career?
Yeah, and we don't have enough time for me to talk about all the Black women that have helped me get to this position, but I will, say something about a few. I've had the great fortune of working for Black judges and Black attorneys, which is really uncommon for a career because, Black people make up about 5% of all the attorneys in the United States. And so I will say in law school, I was paired with a mentor. Her name is Rhonda Tate Trevelyan. And we have just been, good friends, kept in touch. She signed up for this mentor program, and she offered me a job or interview at Lewis and Monday, after I had been working for my judge, as a judicial law clerk. And so we just kind of kept that relationship. So that wasn't something I applied for. That was something that she saw in me, and she texted me and said, would I be interested? And I very unprofessionally said yes, like, yes. Um, and I'm so thankful to Judge Sheila Johnson, who I worked on her campaign for Michigan Supreme Court. I was in the suite with her when the final numbers came in, and she ultimately lost that election. But we stayed very close. She actually officiated my wedding, and she recommended me to the judge that ultimately hired me for my first clerk position. And I would be remiss if I didn't just say thank you to Judge John A. Murphy, who was the first judge that I worked for, that really treated me like an equal and not a staffer, and really respected my view and opinions. We disagreed, but of course I'm going to, draft opinions in the way that, he thinks, but he really would go back and forth. And sometimes his mind would change based upon our conversation. And when I called him to say I was running for Michigan Supreme Court, he's the longest serving Black judge in Michigan's history. And so I was very nervous because I thought the response would be, who are you? And, to be running for Michigan Supreme Court. But he said, that's perfect for you. And so, just uplifting me in that way, and having mentors that aren't afraid of their mentees exceeding, what they were able to do in their career has been so heartwarming, so invaluable to me in my journey. Deborah Nance worked on her first judicial campaign, and practiced before her as a criminal law attorney. So, and all these people, my mentors, and have really uplifted me. And I'm so, so thankful.
It's great that so many people embraced you, as you, came into your own, throughout your career. That's wonderful. And lastly, now this is a political question, so I totally understand if you have to refrain from answering, but I know that you are an AKA. I was going to say were, but AKA for life. And I know that we have a presidential candidate who, if she gets in the White House, would be the first AKA elected to office. And I just was curious if that excites you at all, because I have friends who are AKAs who are just like hyped for this. And so I just wonder, if that is something that it's just fun to sort of think about the possibility of that.
Well, it's so fun. Well, first of all, shout out to all of the Divine Nine who have been, super supportive in my career, and especially AKAs that have uplifted me, that have, let me know to fix my hair and to straighten out my skirt and all of those things. And, being the first Black sorority, I think it makes sense for us to continue to be first in so many different aspects. My colleague in the House, Senator Sarah Anthony, is the first Black person, first woman to chair appropriations. And she is also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Obviously, our current vice president is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And so we have a history of being the first. And I'm so excited to see how many more firsts we can be, but also to make it, normal, right? Being the first obviously should be celebrated, but it should be celebrated because now we can make it normal and unremarkable.
Well said. Justice Bolden, I think that's all from me, but was there anything else that you wanted to add, or just anything you wanted to say to voters? Or
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to me at this point in my life is my daughter Emmy, who has been with me on this journey literally since since the beginning, since before I declared, right? And she is 2 now, and is just my inspiration every single day to keep going, I carry with me the decisions that I make, and how it will affect her and so many people in the state of Michigan. And I'm just really honored to have had her on this journey, and I'm very honored to be a justice of the Michigan Supreme Court.
Thank you for tuning in to Democracy Docket's 2024 Candidate Q&A series. To stay up to date on all voting rights news, please subscribe to our free newsletter. Thank you, and see you next time.